Hey everybody, Saresu3 here. I just got back from watching Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, and I just wanted to record a review of it because everything's fresh in my head. And I wanted to do a spoiler review, and when I get to the spoiler portion of the video, I will let you know, but I wanted to do at least the beginning section of the video for those who may not have seen it yet, but wanted a little bit of information going in. I'll just give you my overall impressions and the score at the very beginning, and then once I get into spoiler territory, I will let you know, and then you could just put the video in your watch later if you want to hear the rest. But my overall impressions was pretty positive. I would give it a solid 7 out of 10, 7.5 out of 10. I haven't quite decided between the two. It has its problems. It's definitely not a perfect movie. There are things that they could have really done differently. I think that would have been better. But they did a fair amount that I enjoyed. And I really like the direction that they went with the majority of the characters and the majority of the story. So I would highly recommend going and watching it. It doesn't really feel like episode 7 or episode 8, which, depending on your perspective, could be a good or bad thing. I know a lot of people didn't like episode 7 and episode 8 partially because of how they felt. Some people thought that it was way too much of a homage to the original trilogy and how some scenes were like an exact carbon copy. There are definitely homages to the original trilogy in this film, but I would say that they are nowhere near as overt as they have been. But yeah, 7 out of 10. Go watch it at least just to finish out the series so you can say you've seen all 9. I think it's at least worth that, at least. But yeah, so I'll get into the spoiler section now. So if you don't want to know anything about the film, you haven't seen it yet, go ahead, pause the video, put it in your watch later section of the YouTube account, and then yeah, let me know what you think after you have seen it. I would love to know everybody's opinions, if they liked it, if they didn't like it. Star Wars fans tend to be very, very passionate about this, and I would love to have that kind of conversation going on in the comment section because I love Star Wars. I love talking about Star Wars. I love just the discourse and the differences in opinions, just talking about something that we all, I think, at the end of the day, really love. So, spoilers. Okay, here we go. Pros of this movie. The very beginning of the film just kind of throws you in to the action, to the story. The beginning scenes really set the tone for the film quite beautifully. The beginning of the movie is basically Kylo Ren going and finding the Emperor, and I really love the scene. I really like the tone that it set. It's more dark. It's more ominous. You definitely feel like there's threat there, which I feel like is a big problem for most movies in general. I feel like you have a villain in a movie, like in a superhero movie, for example, you have villains and that you just don't feel really threatened by them or what they stand for or what they do because they don't really portray that villain very well. And I think with the villain being Palpatine and somebody that we know and somebody that we know their capabilities, it was just a great reminder of that and a great way to set the tone for the rest of the film. I liked the interactions between Poe and Rey specifically because these are two characters that we really haven't seen together in scenes too often between the two movies. I like that they made their relationship complicated. They don't really like each other, or they're at least very annoyed with how the other acts, and they're very nitpicky with each other. So it's a different relationship dynamic than what we've seen from Rey, because every relationship that Rey has had has either been the extreme of one side or the other. Like her relationship with Finn is not really that complicated. They have a great relationship, really good friends, and then you have somebody like Leia who's like a mentor to her and everything like that. Then on the other side you have Kylo Ren, which is I would say a complicated relationship, but is more steeped in negativity than anything else. So it was nice to see that kind of relationship added to the mix, to where not everything is the same throughout everybody. Like just because Poe is in the Resistance does not mean that Rey likes him or that Rey gets along with him. And to me, that makes sense. I mean, this is what real life is. You can have people who fight for a cause or believe the same thing as you do, but you don't like how they are as a person. You don't like their personality or whatever like that. So that's just brings an element of realism and relatability between the characters of Poe and Rey. The relationship between Finn and Poe is the same. Between Finn and Rey is the same. So that part is, it's acceptable for sure. They needed to keep some things the same, some things familiar with other for the audience. The scenes with Leia, I'm kind of mixed on, but to be fair, there's really not a lot they could have done, so I don't really fault JJ or the creative team or anything for what they did, because they basically just had to take footage that they've already shot of her from previous films. And there were a lot of points where you could really tell that they were trying to work around it, and it just felt weird. But I appreciated that they did that instead of making her a CGI character or anything else. It was a great implicit tribute to Carrie Fisher and to the work that she had done in the previous films, and carrying it over to a film that she could obviously not be a part of, but still leave her stamp. So I really, really enjoyed that. The CGI for the most part was very, very good. The ending fight with Palpatine, Rey, and Kylo Ren was exceptional in terms of the CGI. All the space battles that we see was really, really good. From the CGI aspect, I really don't have too many complaints. I think overall the film is quite strong. Good characters for the most part, good CGI, decent dialogue. So it's definitely better than 7 and 8 in that regard. Now to the cons of the film. One thing that I have not really liked throughout 7, 8, and now 9 is that how lightsaber combat has been treated. If you look at the original trilogy between 4, 5, and 6, the lightsaber combat was clunky, slow, and this makes sense because the trilogy was just new. Not a whole lot was known about it. There wasn't a lot of popularity. There wasn't a ton of places to go with it because it just hadn't been thought of yet. And then you get to the prequels, and the prequels are supposed to be the peak of where the Jedi Order are, where the Sith Order are. So it makes sense that there would be faster paced lightsaber combat. There would be actual lightsaber forms implemented and everything like that. But then you get to 7, 8, and 9, and it just feels like the original trilogy kind of choreography. In this film, there were multiple lightsaber fights between Kylo Ren and Rey, and all of them just felt clunky, and they felt slow, and they all felt and looked way too similar. There wasn't a whole lot of variety with it. And you could potentially argue that the biggest reason for that is the lightsaber fights weren't supposed to be the focus. They were supposed to be a medium for what was happening with the characters and how the characters were developing throughout the film. And I can understand that argument, but I think with this being the last film of the Star Wars saga, I think the lightsaber fights need to be bumped up. I think the intensity needs to be bumped up. You're expecting Rey to have more training because a certain amount of years have elapsed between 8 and 9, and she's had time to train. Kylo Ren has increased his abilities as well and his power, so you would expect that the lightsaber fights would evolve. You would expect that they would be faster paced, or at the very least more intense, and they just really weren't. So that was a big complaint of mine. The pacing of the film was very, very fast. Like I said in the pros section of this, that it kind of just threw you right into the tone of the film, right into the action, and right into what the film is about. And that, to me, is completely and totally fine. I think that's a great way to start everything off. But then as the film progressed through Act 1 and Act 2, you just didn't get a chance to breathe. It just hit you with one thing after another. And some of the editing made it feel like it was rushed between scenes. And you can hit your audience with scene after scene or fight after fight after fight and still implement it well and still give it a comfortable feeling. Whereas with this, I don't feel like that was the case. It just felt way too fast. It felt like they needed to slow down on some of the things that was happening, and they needed to take more time to develop more things. But instead, it just felt like they were just rushing through. And I think, like I said earlier, I think the biggest part of that is just in the editing room. There was a lot of edits where it just kind of felt jarring going from one scene to another, and those scenes just being so full of stuff happening so quickly, it just didn't give you a chance to breathe in a good way. And yeah, I just think that was a poor choice. Another criticism that I have is how they dealt with Palpatine's defeat, and the whole relationship between Palpatine and Rey. We find out in this film that Rey is a Palpatine. So in the same way, they don't really explain this that much, which is a big problem for me. But what I gathered is the same way that Palpatine created Anakin in Shmi's womb or whatever is the same thing that happened with Rey's father, who is supposed to be Palpatine's son. They don't really explain if that's what happened. They don't really explain if the son had any kind of force attunement or anything like that. All we know is that they dropped Rey off on Jakku because Emperor Palpatine was wanting Rey, and her parents said no, and they were killed for their trouble. But yeah, it still doesn't make a ton of sense to me. I don't mind at all that Rey is a Palpatine. I think it's a different direction. I think people were wanting her to be a Skywalker or a Kenobi or this or that. I actually liked Kylo Ren's explanation of your parents were nobodies, like you're not that special. Like, I liked that explanation because it really played into Rey's fears of not being accepted, not belonging anywhere. I really think that was something that should have been explored more instead of the Palpatine. But if they were going to make her the child or related to anybody, I think Palpatine is fine. But moving on to how Palpatine was defeated, there was a big scene where with Rey and Kylo Ren, they basically just both fought the Emperor. When you first see the Emperor, he's like hooked up to this long arm that's, I guess, sustaining his life after being thrown down the chasm in episode 6. That was sustaining him, and his whole plan was to have Rey strike him down to save her friends, and then his spirit was supposed to go into Rey when she did that. So really garbage plan to begin with. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And then once Rey got there and Kylo Ren followed her there, he took their bond, which is somewhat explained in the movie, but not really too much, and used their force bond to reinvigorate himself to where he didn't need the wiring and anything and all that anymore. That wiped Rey and Kylo Ren out completely, and the Emperor did lightning stuff, and which was cool because he shot his lightning up in the air, and then this big space battle that was going on overhead, which is supposed to pay homage to Return of the Jedi, was disrupted because Palpatine's lightning was latching on to the resistant ships and everybody else who was there. But the Emperor's identity is not just tied to his Force lightning, and it's kind of frustrating to see. In episode 3, we saw Palpatine stand toe-to-toe with the two best duelists in the Jedi Order and survive. And not only survive, but do fine and do well. But we didn't get to see any of Palpatine's lightsaber skills. All we saw was a Palpatine monologuing, lightning Rey, and Rey blocks with the lightsaber, and Palpatine says, "I am all the Sith," and then Rey gives the other lightsaber because she has Leia's lightsaber and Luke's or Anakin's lightsaber. She says, "But I'm the Jedi," and then she just pushes the lightning back and disintegrates him. I just think it's a really dumb way to end that fight, especially because it was so quick. I get that they were trying to portray Rey as somebody who could withstand the Emperor's power. You just saw him do something you've never seen before. He is taking out hundreds and thousands of ships with his lightning sitting on his throne, and then here's Rey just blocking it with the lightsaber. Like, I understand what they were trying to do from a thematic standpoint, from a character development standpoint, but for the last film, for the visuals, it was just incredibly disappointing. There needed to be more to that fight besides the Emperor monologuing and then Rey killing him with his own lightning. It's like, it's boring and predictable. I didn't like it. And then at the end, Kylo Ren comes in and heals Rey the same way that Rey has healed him when Rey actually beat him in a lightsaber fight, stabbed him, and then healed him back up, and then left in his TIE Interceptor. And then Reylo, anybody who shipped Reylo, it happened. There was a kiss before Kylo Ren died. That happened, which was a very interesting choice to me. It's just the ending sequence, like the middle to end of Act 3, I just felt like was sloppy and could have been done better. The final big criticism that I have is Kylo Ren's motivation for seeking out Palpatine. In the opening crawl, it talks about how Kylo Ren is searching out the Emperor because Kylo Ren feels the Emperor is a threat to his power. And I think that is one of the worst motivators that you can attribute to Kylo Ren's character. Because all it does is it takes him from where he was in 8 to somebody who's confident in who he is, confident in himself, has found himself, to now somebody in 9 who has reforged his mask that he hides behind and is now scared to lose what he has. It's just it's a devolution from 8 in terms of his character, and I just think it's a terrible idea. I just think moving backwards with Kylo Ren even further than they did with him just putting on the mask, I think is bad. You could have made it to where he was seeking out Palpatine to learn more, gain more knowledge, to become more powerful, or something else besides, oh no, I don't want to lose my power as supreme leader, so I'm gonna go seek out Palpatine and kill him. I think there's so much more that can be done with the relationship between Kylo Ren and Palpatine, that the way that they did it just seemed mediocre. It just seemed like a de-evolution of Kylo Ren's character from 8 to 9. Yeah, those are going to be my three or my few biggest criticisms of the film. How Leia died was okay. I think she was trying to reach out to Ben, and that's how he got stabbed. Is he heard his mother's voice? He got stabbed. Leia dies, and Rey heals him, and then Kylo sees his dad and has a conversation with Force Ghost Dad or Memory Dad, or like whatever, and then throws his lightsaber into the water. Like, okay. Sure, he needed something to push him over the edge towards the redemptive arc. I understand that, but it's just, it could have been executed a bit cleaner. I know I have a lot of cons that seemingly less positives, but that's because the biggest cons for me, like, I think those are the only problems with the film, at least for the most part, that are beyond nitpicky. But I just think these things they did really poorly on that could have made the film exceptional. But the overall positives of the film I did enjoy. more than I did the negatives. So I do think that the positive outweighs the negatives enough. But yeah, 7.5 out of 10 is my score, and it was sad to sit there when I was watching the credits. Or no, sorry, not the credits, the trailer before the films. It was difficult to sit there and watch them because I was both equally excited and equally dreading what was coming next, because I knew eventually the trailers would stop and we'd get into the film. And I was excited to get into the film, but I was also dreading getting into the film because this is the end of the Skywalker saga. This is the end of an era. Like, I've grown up on Star Wars. This series means a lot to me, and I realize that they're not done making Star Wars films, but the Skywalker saga has been such a huge part of my life and a part of the culture of, I would say, the world, at least in a lot of areas of the world, that it was difficult to sit there and watch. And it was emotional for me when we got to the end of the film, because this was it. This was Star Wars. And even if the movie was a 10 out of 10, I would have felt just as emotional. Because it's a heavy feeling to watch the end of something that you've grown up with, something that you love. And I never really experienced that with Lord of the Rings, which I like better than Star Wars because of my age when it came out. But yeah, it was tough to watch because it was disappointing in some areas, but it was mainly tough to watch because I knew what was coming. So but thank you guys for watching my spoiler review of Rise of Skywalker. I realized I went a little long. I apologize for that, but there was a lot for me to say. I really did enjoy this movie. It has its flaws, but I really did like it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know if you liked it, if you didn't like it, if there's stuff that I didn't cover in this review that you think should be mentioned. Let me know. I'd love to talk about it with you guys. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you want to see more reviews or more content from this channel. I would greatly appreciate both. Yeah, thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.